Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Good evening.
I think there's an echo. All right. Let's wait for another 2 minutes until everyone joins, and yeah, we'll get started. Okay. Yeah. Is the stream quality good enough? You can read?
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. So before everyone joins, also Also, what I wanted to say, when I ask if there's any questions, you can also unmute yourself and ask. So unless I'm not talking, like you can write the questions like in the chat, but otherwise at the end of any slide or, well, whenever I'm asking, you can always just unmute yourself. Just make sure you don't, leave it or you don't have any background noise. Okay, so let's see how many people we are here. 30 people. Okay, let's give it a couple more seconds. Will today's meeting be recorded? Good question. It's already being recorded on one of my laptops here. But I would really appreciate if any of you has the possibility to also record this just in case. It's quite a lot of material. So does anyone have that possibility? Do you have maybe a second screen or... Otherwise, no worries, like I'm recording on the side anyways. Okay, I think it's time to start. All right, so hello and welcome everyone again to the second course of the FullStack JavaScript online course. Just like last time, make sure you have your phones next to you. We'll also have some questions to answer. You can give some feedback to the slides. Okay, so in today's lecture, there we go. So in today's lecture, we'll start with a short quiz with material from last time. So there wasn't really much stuff there, but we'll go a bit through the theory. I will show you how you can set up a very basic development environment. So how you can actually start writing JavaScript. You can like start writing code. And then we'll go through some of the basics of programming in JavaScript. Basically, what we'll do this lesson, then the next one, we'll kind of go through the typical material that maybe some of you had in schools, in other languages like Turbo Pascal or C++ or whatever you learned. So we'll actually try to do that in these two lectures. So we'll learn things like variables, data types, logical operators, functions. And then we'll also see how do you make an interaction between HTML elements and JavaScript. And then, yeah, you'll get your first programming challenge, which you'll have 1 week to work on and to try your new skills. I know that, well, at least based on your CVs, that for some of you, this might be really, really basic material. And for some others of you who never programmed in their life, it might be a bit difficult. So that's why also after this lecture, if some people have questions, it would be, and if a lot of people have questions, it would be nice if people have a bit of knowledge in programming that they would help, right? So on the Facebook group and so on. All right, so take your phones out. This is the link 3B284. All right. Yep, 6 people. Nice.
Can you go back to the link?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, also throughout the presentation, like you can keep your phone open with this app, and if you have, like a question, if there's something that you didn't really understand, you can, use those emojis, I guess, to, well, express your feelings. Also, if you liked something or yeah, if something wasn't clear, just use that. Let's look at the chat. Okay, so we've got 26 people. There should be 30 minus 5, perhaps. Anyone still struggling to go online? I guess not. Yeah, 25 is about right, I guess. 27, okay. So I guess those are my colleagues, yeah. Okay, right. So first we'll start just with questions, not really a quiz. So this one is just pretty much about, yeah, so did you enjoy the last lecture? Let's see what you think. Yeah, nope, that's okay. Yeah, I guess that's my colleagues. It was okay. Nice. Okay, it was great. Yes. Okay, okay. Cool. As it was expected, I guess. Are you excited for today's lecture? Not much of an option there. Okay. So 7 people are just average excited about it. Okay. Now some actually important question. Did you install Visual Studio Code and Chrome on your computer? Good job, 813. Whoa. Okay, so pretty much everyone, I guess. Nice. That is nice. Okay, now we'll actually start the quiz. So I have just 3 questions from last time. Let's see if any knowledge is still there. Okay. Yep. Okay, 26. Yeah, I think someone is struggling there. Okay, 25 people. Yeah, I think I'll start now. No, yes? Yeah, I'll start now. Okay, so yeah, just like last time, we have 15 seconds to answer the questions, and the questions are just pretty much based on the slides from last time, nothing really special. Okay, I'm clicking start now. Start the quiz. So first one. Which one is a markdown language? So it's a multiple choice one. Get ready. All right, 12 answers, 15. 3, 2, 1. Everyone has answered, and yes, most of the people understood. So yeah, if you don't remember what a markdown language is, you can take a look at the slides last time. These are pretty much computer languages, which are not actual programming languages. A markdown language is usually used to represent data in a certain way, and HTML is one of them. For the 7 people who didn't answer this correctly, if this is confusing for you also, you can come back with this question later. Okay, I'll move on further. Okay. Which type of language requires most knowledge in computer science? Look at your phone. Markdown languages, programming languages, or scripting languages? Okay, everyone has answered, and okay, most of the people understood that. That's nice. 22 people. Yep. So yeah, for the 4 people who maybe missed something, programming languages indeed are the type of languages that require most of the knowledge in computer science. These are languages such as like C++, where you usually have to understand really well like computer architecture and that's it. JavaScript is a scripting language. I guess you all knew that from last time. We'll move on to the third and the last question. Which of these languages does not run natively in a web browser? CSS, Python, JavaScript, or HTML? Yeah, let's see. Time's up. Okay, so most of the people got this one right as well. Yeah, so just to tell you a bit again, what I told you last time, the three languages, pretty much the only three languages that actually run in your browser are JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. You always have options to use a lot of other languages to, to build web applications, but what it actually happens is that you eventually compile that code in these three languages. Okay, so now we'll move on to the slides of today. Oh, the leaderboard, of course. Okay, someone is trying to promote his Instagram here. No? Okay. Good job, whoever this is. And the rest of you, okay, I guess you got those right. Next time we'll have a more challenging quiz. Really, who's this? Why? Andrejka. Okay. Andrejka. Okay, so now you have two options. It really depends on how you prefer to learn things. So if you have a second screen or you have a proper attention span, you can actually try to open, I'll go through the steps. So you can actually try to open Visual Studio Code and, have it on a second screen or on the side and pretty much follow the coding with myself. If this is a bit too difficult for you, you'll get the recording in the end. You'll be able to experiment in your own time. Yeah, so in general, I always prefer to try things, hands-on myself. So it's all up to you. So this is the list of things you have to do. I'm about to, go on a different tab and show you actually how this is done. Create a new folder anywhere in your PC, documents, desktop, whatever. Open it in Visual Studio Code. So the way you do that, you right-click on the folder. I'm about to show that. And there's an option, Open with Code. And this would pretty much open Visual Studio Code, and you shouldn't have any files there. Then you can right-click in the Files view in Visual Studio Code, and you can create a new file. You name that file index.html. And actually now I'm going to get out of the presentation, so I show you how this would be done. Okay, so I made a new folder here on my desktop. Open with code, as I just mentioned. So you should see something like this. You close this tab and you right-click here. You can create a new file and you'll call it index.html. Enter. And so far, is it all clear? Like the ones who want to follow the coding, anything special? It's quite clear what was done so far. Is the screen too small for you, maybe? I need to restart my, okay. Good luck. Okay, let's come back to this. Anyone who is trying to get to this step and is not able to?
I don't seem to find the option if I right-click to open with code.
Yeah. Okay, that is possible if you perhaps didn't follow one of the installation steps. But in that case, not to go to install everything again, the easiest way to do now, you just open VS Code from, just from your Windows. And here you just do File, Open Folder, and then you go to whatever folder you have there. Quite clear?
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, no one said anything, so I shall assume, you are done with this part. The next thing is wherever you created that file in that folder, just open it. Usually by default, it will open with Google Chrome or whatever browser you have. So if that doesn't appear with you like this, you would actually have to do this, open with, and then you open it with Chrome. And then you should get to this step, which is pretty much just a blank page. And the last thing to do in preparation is, either click Ctrl-Shift-I, or you can just right-click and do inspect. And then you move to the console. Okay. And throughout this lecture, you can, I don't know, if you have a second screen or whatever is easy for you, what you'll do, you'll be able to write code here on the left side, and then you'll see your output here on the right. If you have the possibility, put myself on the screen as well. That's also very important. But if you feel like this distracts you too much, or you can't focus on the slides, we'll record the video. You'll be able to give questions later. So I guess let's get started. Okay, I'm back to the presentation. Anyone needs help to set up the coding environment, or that's it? Nothing? Okay, cool. All right, so at this point, what we'll pretty much do, we'll run JavaScript in the most original environment, so to say, where JavaScript was meant to, what it was created for, in the browser. And what we're going to do, we're going to make, let's say, a web page where you're going to run a JavaScript, and then throughout this, you're going to learn some of the basics. It is very possible, again, that a lot of you already did this, at least based on your CVs. Maybe, it helps refresh some memory, or maybe, get a different perspective. So let's start with the first slide. We'll start with a very basic example of a very simple web page. So before we get into actual JavaScript, we'll have to go a bit through HTML. You can try, meanwhile, pretty much copy this text, or you can find it on W3 Schools, but that's not very important really right now. What I'm trying to show you here, this is like a very basic, the core things, what you need to just have a web page. So HTML, as I mentioned, it's a markdown language. And the whole concept of it is that you write text in a specific structured way, and then that text transforms into something nice that renders. We don't need extensions for Visual Studio. You will need extensions a bit later. For now, this will be good enough for this lecture. So the ones who are now willing to experiment, if you would copy paste this code in your Visual Studio Code, you can try it. Otherwise, at the end of the lecture, you will get all the code that's in all the slides. So you'll be able to run it as well. Okay, so the whole concept of HTML tags, it's really simple. So they have to open and close, right? So this is how you'd open a tag. This is how you close it. And then you have sub-elements. And the main sub-elements of an HTML web page, it's head and body. And what goes inside those tags is pretty much, inside the head, you usually have information about your page. Usually not stuff that's actually shown, and what you have inside the body, this is all the stuff that's rendered graphically. And what this web page would look like is pretty much just a big text, which says this big text here. So inside your HTML code, you're able to make certain, let's say, areas, like you can pretty much put JavaScript code inside it, okay? So if you see these two tags, they mean that between them, you can write JavaScript code, and that will be the code that runs when you start the website. Later, you'll learn how you can run that code based on different kind of user events. But what all of this code will do, it will show you a big text in the browser, and a message will appear in the console, and you're about to see where that actually is. So I'll now show you exactly this in the browser. I'll copy the code that I already have here, right here. I'll go right. Yeah, I made the font a bit bigger. Hopefully it's readable for you. I will delete all the stuff that is not necessary. My bad, this is the wrong place. Okay, let's make it simpler. If you're able to copy paste this code in your web browser and you see the big text, this is the start. We'll now actually go through learning JavaScript. So in general, what's important to know, a lot of the HTML, I will not go through the basics of it because it's quite easy to learn on your own. I'll give you the links where to look, and you'll discover types of these tags as time goes. Yeah, so this is the slide for it. We'll not focus much on all the types of HTML elements, on all sorts of styling and all this kind of stuff, but you will need to know some basics. So as we discussed, I already showed you what the head and the body means. The kind of things that you might use later, it's, for example, how to have a paragraph, how to put, a larger text, how to make bold text, and then we'll learn lists. It'll be really useful if, you go on w3schools/HTML and actually have very structuredly shown each of these tags, what they do, and it's quite easy to experiment with them. If you'll have questions, you'll also be able to ask them. And well, throughout the lectures, you will need a bit of knowledge of this. Okay, how do we get the code? Yes, maybe it would be an idea that I would give you a link now if you want to copy paste some of the stuff. So I am now hosting this on the GitHub. I will send you this link inside here. All right. You go in the folder called Lecture 2. And if you click here, you'll see all the code that I'm going to use today. And I think that specific example wasn't there. But if you go on W3 Schools, here, W3 Schools, HTML, I think I should be somewhere here. Learn HTML. Yes, there you go. So this link right here, you can pretty much copy this and just take a look at how that looks in your browser. Yeah, use it as a base. Okay, so now back to the presentation. So as I mentioned, yeah, you'll have to get familiar with HTML in your own time. We'll not go through each of them and through all the basics. But we'll start with JavaScript. So the most basic thing in a programming language are variables. And I guess for some of you, this is really common knowledge, but a variable is pretty much like a variable in mathematics. It's, it's a place in your computer memory which stores a certain piece of information. A variable, it can be a number, it can be a piece of text, it can be, well, actually, we'll go through the types now. And a variable is something that you can then reference in multiple other places in your program. Yeah, I think I explained it quite well. You can find a lot of it on internet as well. Okay. So the way to declare a variable in JavaScript is by writing let a name, whatever you want. So a name can be any combination of, any kind of text. Only thing is that it should not start with a number. And then this would be a variable of type number that you create. And I'm now going to show you how this looks like in here. So I'm going to clean up a bit here. Give me a second. So this is how our website looks like so far. We just simply have let's see. I don't even have head and body. We'll just simplify it to this. So as I mentioned, if you want to run JavaScript in the browser, if you want a piece of JavaScript code to run when you go on a web page, the most simple way to do that is by opening and closing a script tag. And inside here, you can write JavaScript code. So as I showed you right here, let x equals 5. So now we have a very simple JavaScript library, JavaScript variable. And what we can do, we can print out that variable. So in order to print out things, you use console.log. You don't print anything on the web page or anything like that. This is just a console for you as a developer to look, well, to make your code pretty much say what it does at every point in runtime. So we'll start with this to just write a simple piece of text. So hello, you save, refresh the page, and we see here that in the console, oh, thank God I can zoom this in. So here in the console, we see this piece of text being printed out. You can also use the same one to print out a variable. So we'll actually print, we'll print x. Refresh the page. So we see number 5 being printed here. So again, quite basic. I guess some of you already know it, so I'll move on. So this is, so now you know how to create a variable and how to print it. Not really useful information yet. And now we'll go through the next thing, so which is constants. So a variable can also get different numbers, get different values as your program runs, but sometimes you have something which you don't want to have a changeable value. So we'll have these two variables written down here. So the first one will be 5, the second will be 10. And before you understand the difference between a normal variable and a constant, let's see what kind of operations you can do with them. Give me a second. Okay, so before we go to the operations, it would also be a bit useful to show you what types of variables you can have in JavaScript. So the very simple one that I've seen, these are numbers. And you pretty much make that variable equal a number. There can also be float point numbers, so not integers. And you just delimit that by just writing dot. If some of you are familiar with C++ or like Turbo Pascal or so, you've probably seen there that you have to be very careful about like the type of variable that you declare. The good thing in JavaScript is that you do not have to pre-specify what type of variable you're creating. And that's one of the things which gives you like a lot of freedom and so on. Some programmers are a bit scared about that. They every time they think that the types have to be declared. But then, well, as you'll learn more, you'll find the answer for yourself, what's better and whatnot. Python is also a language where they don't care about types. So the next type is Boolean. So Boolean, it's a true or a false, sometimes represented as a 0 or 1. What's nuts? Like the types? Yeah, okay. So this would be the types that we're going to work with today. But next time, we're going to look into arrays. An array is pretty much just a list of variables. You'll see later why they're very important in programming. For now, we're not going to look much into them. And then the arrays can, either have numbers inside them. They can have text. They can be mixed. Again, something that you don't easily have in a lot of other languages. So in other languages, you would have to, pre-specify the size of this array, to specify what type would be there, and you'd have to know a bit about computers. So JavaScript usually helps you to really focus on just the application you're building and not care of how, those numbers are stored in your CPU or RAM or whatever. And the last type of variables in JavaScript would be objects, or also called JSON. This is one of the things which is quite powerful in JavaScript. And in fact, it influenced like this types of data structure you can now find in pretty much all the programming languages, and that came from JavaScript. But this will be something we'll look into next time. Okay, before I move on, is this slide pretty much clear? Is it clear what I'm trying to say here? Is it very easy for you, or any kind of feedback would be really helpful now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for me also.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So what do you do with these variables? You do operations. Okay. And okay. Yeah. So the most simple thing to do with let's say with a number variable, you can add it. You can multiply it, divide it. This one, I'm not sure how you say it in English. This is restul împărțirii, like the
Modulo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can see it from these numbers. This is pretty much 13 divided by 4, and then well, it rounds up to the closest integer, and then what's left, you have it. Yeah, you have it as a result. Yeah, you'll use it in the programming challenge that you're going to get at the end of this lecture. And then, yeah, you can do a bit more complex operations, like power. This would be the square root. So, yeah, square root of 4 is 2, I guess. This one would be pretty much 13 at the power of 4, a big number, I guess. So, as you can see, variable, you can assign it a number. This is the third variable. By the way, do you see where my mouse moves when I show? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, so a variable can be reassigned as many times as you want throughout your program. It gets new values. You can read those values and do something based on them. Now, math operations are quite simple, and you see the same structure in a lot of other languages in the world. So probably nothing really special for you. Also, maybe I forgot to mention something important about the syntax. You see that every time I use this, well, it's called semicolon. I use the semicolon every time after a new line. So JavaScript does not force you to have this semicolon. It's not mandatory. But some people prefer it for, like nicer code and so on. And also, yeah, I think it's pretty much like a syntax thing that people like to see, and you're generally safer if you use those at the end of every line. But you'll never get an error if you don't. A language like C++ will basically not compile if you try to do that. Now, on the right side, these are string operations, so operations that you can do with a text. So as seen in the last slide as well, creating a variable of type text, this is pretty much all you have to do. The text can go in this kind of delimiters. You can also use the single ones, and you can even use this interesting looking ones. Those are a bit special, you're about to see. So yeah, you have the freedom to use 3 types of delimiters. Yeah, so something in JavaScript which is kind of nice, but a lot of programmers are also a bit skeptical about, is the fact that you can add strings by using the mathematical plus operator. So if I have this and that, right, these 2 strings, if I add them and then I do a console.log to result, I will see that, that this is the output variable. Yeah, this is banana, all of it. You can also add other strings together with other variables. So you can add as many of them with a plus sign. And then that's how you can construct your string. If you will add a number, so I'll skip a bit here. So adding a string with a plus operator with a number, if at least one of the variables is of type string, all the other variables, even if they're numbers, they will be transformed to strings. So if I have a variable, some number, which is 10, this is of type number, and then I have this one. If I add them together, I will actually get 10 as text, if that makes sense. So this would be the plus operator used with strings. In general, a lot of people say this is not a safe way of creating strings. Me personally, I think it's okay any kind of way you do, as long as you achieve your goal. But in the modern JavaScript, the way to combine variables inside a string would be this way. So if you see this delimiters, this is, I think on most of the keyboards, if you click Shift and whatever number you have, the key on the left of number 1. Yeah. So if you use those kind of delimiters, what you can do is that you can type, whatever text you want. And then with this $sign and, this curly brackets, inside that, you can actually write the name of a variable. And what the JavaScript engine does, it takes that variable and puts it right here. So these 2 lines will have the same result. Not the same, but I mean, they're kind of the same type of operation. It's just this is a more modern way. You'll notice that, JavaScript in general is a language that develops over time. People come up with new ideas. They make it more solid, more mature. So sometimes on forums when you're looking for answers, you might see still some of the things which are a bit more old school, so to say. So also going back to this previous slide, maybe a lot of you have seen that people use var as declaring variables in JavaScript. And if you watch any tutorial, can you call a function inside a $sign? Yes, I'm about to answer that. So var is also a very valid way of declaring a variable. The problem is, you'll understand later when we'll discuss about scope and so, it's much better nowadays to use let and const. But if you use var, your code will still run. You can still copy old code from other people which use var and it will run. But I guess try to avoid it. So the question was, can you call a function inside a $sign? So before we go to, we'll get to functions later. The answer is, it should be a function that returns something. It can't be just a function. I think that's as far as I know. But we'll get to that a bit later. Okay, so string addition, which is string concatenation. This is the most simple operation you can do with text. But most of the times you'll need a bit more advanced operations. So for that, there is a lot of there's like the string library in JavaScript, which here I'm going to show you 4 very simple operations. So for example, if you want to know which character do you have at a specific place. So for example, here I'm trying to print the second character, but as you can see, the second character is actually an L. So if you don't do that already, in the programming world, people count from 0. So this letter E is number 0, this is number 1, and this is number 2. So the character at position 2 is I. Then another operation is replacing, for example. So what you can do, you can write a piece of, let's say, a pattern, like a piece of text, and then you say, what do you want instead of it? So so for example, taking this word, you can replace all the E's with A's. Slicing, for example, you can take only a special amount, like a specific number of characters out of your piece of text. So you'll also experiment with this later. You don't have to learn all of them by heart. Like, what you have to really know is that there is string operators, and you can manipulate it in a lot of ways. And based on whatever solution you're building, you'll always have to Google things. Like, you don't have to learn these things by heart. I'll now go to 2 of your questions. Why do you use text char at? Isn't it easier text to? Mean they're the same. Honestly, I never used that in JavaScript. I'm not 100% sure if it actually works. I think it does, but the thing is, those are usually the square brackets. Those are usually operators you use with arrays. So sometimes you have to be very careful what kind of type you're working with, and you don't want to confuse those. But there's a lot of other ways I can show you how you can get a specific characters at a specific place. You'll find whatever works for you by experimenting. You can now get value on index 2 from text. Text is a string, not an array. Okay. When you declare a function, you put let in from it as a data type. Let me understand this question again. When you declare a function, you put let in front of it as a data type. I think someone is trying to ask something. Nico Seven or not? No. Okay. That's just...
No.
Okay. Yulian Yonel, I'm trying to understand your question. So when you declare a function, you put let in front of it as a data type. Let's get later to it. Maybe it'll be clear as I go through the slides. Yeah. So yeah, something I'll tell you also in the end. What would be nice to experiment with if this is the first time you use JavaScript? Check the math library. Try to do some simple math operations, see what they do and whatnot. And then check what kind of operations you can do with strings. So I've shown you how you can replace certain elements, how you slice them. You can also get information whether, like, you can know if there's a specific piece of text, if that text can be found within your initial text. So this is a dot includes. But yeah, all of these things will be interesting when you actually use them in solving a problem. So again, learning them just like that doesn't really make sense. Okay, before I move on, any other questions? You can also unmute yourself and ask, really, like, so that's faster. Yeah. Okay. I'll move on to the next one. So logical operators. So logical operators, you've probably seen it in a lot of other languages. This is pretty much any kind of operations that has to do with Boolean data types. So now we spoke about numbers and text. The third type is Booleans, a variable which can be either true or false. And the most simple, okay, only if you store it in a variable. I think Alexandra actually answered that question correctly. We'll get to that. Okay. So the most simple way to make use of these Booleans is to use if statements. So if statements, it's basically a way, it's a place in your program where your program has to take a decision or the second one, right? It either based on one of these true-false statements, it has to do something. So this is a very simple construction here. This piece of code, if you want, you can copy it. You get it on that link. If you want, you can find this specific section. So what we do here, we create a variable of type number called age. And then we open an if statement. So this is pretty much the syntax. If you did C++, I think it's really much the same. And inside the round brackets, this is where you write your logical statement. And a logical statement, if you the three equals, I'm about to get to that. Good question. So with the statement inside this round brackets, it should eventually return a true or a false. You can have more advanced, like here I'm just comparing a variable to a number, but we're about to learn some operands, and you'll see that you can actually have a very long statement here, but eventually it has to return a true or a false. Okay, so if the number is 23, what we do here, let's say if the number would be 3, what your program would do is it would look here. This statement would actually return false because maybe it's smaller than 18. Then your program would go further, and then you can write an else if. You can write as many else ifs as you want in your statement. Modern programmers kind of don't prefer that you have like really huge, huge places where you have a lot of ifs and else ifs, but you'll get that later as you actually experiment. Now, here, so if you want to compare a number, you can use a bigger or the smaller sign. You can also see that, here pretty much, you can use that sign. If you want to compare with an equal value, if you want to see if two values are equal, you have this triple equal. So this triple equal, it's a bit, it's again something from modern JavaScript. And the reason for that is if you look here in the top right, here you don't see the triple equal sign. So the thing is, if you don't use this triple equal, JavaScript sometimes compares numbers and strings with, you can compare arrays with empty, basically double equal does not care about the type of the variable, which sometimes it's actually very dangerous when you build programs which have this kind of statements. So if you do the triple equal, your program also checks that both variables are of the same type. Okay, so let's say age would be equal to 18 as a number. If I get to this place, I'm first of all checking that they're both numbers, and then I'm checking that they're both the same value mathematically. If I would have a piece of string with 23 inside it, your program will also say that they're equal, when technically in a lot of cases you don't want that to happen. There's a lot of I'll send you some memes about JavaScript and this thing with the triple equal. You might understand it later, because a lot of programmers do a lot of jokes about this triple equal sign. And the reason we have it, it's again because JavaScript is a language that has modernized throughout time. Is equal and the type is the same. Is equal. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then at the end of any if statement, you can always add an else. So usually your program, so your program will go here when none of the statements are true. When you make an if statement, you don't have to mandatory add all of this. You can just have an if and that's it. And then if nothing, you just continue in your program further. So some of the Boolean operations. So here we just compare a number with another one, but let's say we want two conditions to be met. So let's say if you would imagine we'll have another variable, thinking to maybe open. Yeah, I'm thinking to actually show you some hands-on stuff. Okay. So what we'll do here, we'll make that variable of a variable called age of type number, which has a value 15, and then we'll have, let's say, here's experience, whatever name you want. We'll also make it a number, and then we'll go to this if statement of ours. And here, what we had in the previous program, just simplified, if age is bigger than 16, then we'll print something. Good. Then if that doesn't happen, we'll write something else like bad. Okay, so I guess no surprises. You should see the word bad because 15 is not bigger than 16. But now we want two conditions to be met. So these are the Boolean operands. So the most simple one is AND. So I guess some of you already know these operations. So you see them here in this table, and, or, and not. Maybe some of you did electrical engineering. Maybe you just seen this in math. I don't know. This is like if you have two variables A and B, and they have these Boolean values. Based on these operations, this is the output of those combined. And the not operation is pretty much an inversion of that value. So true goes to false and false to true. Samuel Bud is the same as, yes. So those signs, I'm going to type them in the chat. So you can use this to delimit your string. You can use this to delimit your string. And you can use this. Yes, all three are valid options, and there's even like two other ways to do it, but that should be enough for some text. So we'll show you how the AND operand works. So you just write the AND sign 2 times, as you see here, and I want a second condition to be met, and let's say I want that years of experience would be bigger than 5. So I want both of those things to be true. I'll make this variable be 17. So age is bigger than 16, so this will be true. But then if I make this 9, but then this part will not be true. Okay, so if I am going to refresh the page, I see that the console still says bad, because both operations have to be true. So if I, let's say make this number 11, I refresh, I see good. Okay, because because that's how the AND operator works. So going back to the previous value, the other Boolean operator is OR. Yeah, the OR operator. So OR means that at least one of these statements has to be correct. So no matter it's the first one or the second one, this statement will return true if any of these are true. So this is pretty much how you combine multiple conditions. Later, you'll also see that you can even add even more of these. And just like in mathematics, you can combine them by using this round brackets, I guess. And you can always, so the first operation will be this one, and then this will be the second one. And then the last one, the last operator is not. So you can, for example, check if the value is equal or it's not equal with something. So now removing some of this stuff from here, I can say, okay, if age equals 17, we'll print, it's equal, whatever. No else in this case. Was it? Yeah, so now we see, okay, it says that the value is equal to it, but if you modify the first equal with exclamation sign, this means that, well, you negate this Boolean value, and if I refresh, this text is not being printed out. So as I mentioned before, an if statement shouldn't necessarily have the else and the if else and so on. Simply your program will not execute this because the statement is not true. So this is pretty much about Boolean operators. Other things, Booleans, just like other variables, you can copy the value from one of them to another. You can combine them with these operators, and the value can be stored and reused anywhere in your program. Before I move further, is this quite clear? Could you talk about the string comparisons? Okay. A bit back about the string comparisons. So you'll also check the string library later. But string comparisons, if you have two strings with exactly the same, let's try that. So we'll make the first string. This one will be, A, B, C, D. Second string, B, A, C, D, okay? Now, let's check if string 1 is equal to string 2. And if it's not, let's print a message. Okay, so obviously these two strings are not equal. And let us just take a look here. Yeah, they're not equal. Also really try to experiment yourself. Try to compare variables of different types, see what that happens. See what happens if you don't use the double equal sign. I'll send you a table after this lecture which shows there's a very nice. Why am I talking? I can show it to you. Double equal vs triple equal JavaScript. I know that it usually appears somewhere here on the first. Yes, there we go. So let's start with the simple one. Can you kind of see this image? A yes would be nice.
Yes.
Oh, look, really?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess most of you see it. Anyways, I will send you this image later, but this is a simple one. So if you use a triple equal sign, this is what you should expect. So if you have a variable which is true, it will only be equal to another variable which is true. And it's really straightforward, like nothing really special. Triple equal will check that they're of the same type and so on. So this is the source of a lot of programmers' internet memes, not using the triple equal sign. So using the double equal sign will make some of the values. It'll make your JavaScript will say that some of these things are equal. So let's start with the funny ones. So 1 as a string will equal to true as a boolean. An empty array, which we'll learn later, will equal to false. So sometimes in your program you very much do not expect those things to be equal, and like arrays with one element inside sometimes equal with like some sort of like a string of type 1. So for example, this one is a quite ridiculous one. So you can experiment and try and see what your compiler or your engine shows, your browser. But if you use triple signs, you're safe, and then things run like they would run in any other programming language. Okay, so back to the strings. So 2 strings which are of the same type. If I refresh, you see it shows you that they are equal. So if they contain absolutely the same strings in the same manner, then you'll get a true, just like you've seen that in the table. And then what else? Maybe this will not be an operation that you do use often. A lot of times, maybe you're looking into what is inside the string. Maybe you don't do a full comparison, but you do string dot includes. So let's go back to this. So if you're so text dot includes. For example, if you don't want to check if all the text is inside it or only a specific part of it, this operation will return you to true or false based on that. Okay, do you want a 5-minute break for questions, or is it a lot of information, or is it like really basic and this is just very simple for you? What? Let's do like this. Like if you're still on the app, like put this up sign if this is very easy for you, and this other one, like the dislike, I guess, if this seemed like very new or difficult or non-understandable, let's say. Short break would be great. Okay. So here it's 3 minutes to 7. Let's meet at 7 minutes. Oh my God. Yeah, I do need a break. Let's meet at 5 minutes
In 10
past
minutes.
7. 10 minutes. Cool. Okay, so 7. I'm just going to type it, guys. So here now it's this time, and I will meet you at this time. Okay? I'll leave this slide. I'll mute myself and see you in 10 minutes. Bye. Okay, so you all had a nice break. We're all back. Shall we continue? Cool. All right. So before I also move on, I just talked with some of you directly. So some of you are a bit confused, or maybe it's like a lot of material for you, or you never did programming and it's all of a sudden like a lot of stuff. Don't worry. You'll have a lot of time to try things yourself. You have, as you can see, a lot of colleagues here who are willing to help you as well. You know, if it's hard to follow now, you can try the experimenting part after the lecture. Don't try to do both things at the same time. Yeah, you'll have to really try things yourself. And I think the programming challenge that I'll put there will be a good opportunity. But if you have some very specific questions, throw them now. Otherwise, yeah, try to look after the lecture. It's a bit challenging because a lot of you have, well, all of you have very different levels of skills. Like we tried to kind of look for beginners who show a good interest, but I know some of you actually have some studies in programming. Yeah, so just we'll try to help you. Also, there's my colleagues, there's other people from this group chat. We'll try to get everyone up to speed. So yeah, don't worry. All right. I'll move on to the next slide then. So this was about logical operators. Now we're going to talk about functions. So something very important in programming are functions, and why you have them, mainly to not copy paste your code a lot of times. That's the simple explanation. But what a function is, it's pretty much a piece of code that you know that you define once, and then you can run it multiple times. A function can have multiple input parameters. So in general, like a function has, you know, an input and an output, but that's not mandatory. A function can simply be just some operations, and that's it, with no output. And the way to declare a function in JavaScript, so the classical one here on the left, it's this. You write the word function, you give it a name, you open the round brackets, and this is where the arguments go. And the arguments are, you know, the inputs that go to that function. So yeah, I don't know. If you need a much clearer explanation, let me know. So these are the arguments, and inside the curly brackets, this is the piece of code that you want that function to run. Okay, and the return type can be anything. Yes, that is true, and I'm about to get to return types as well. This function does not return anything. It simply takes in this argument and this operand, and what it does, it prints the word hello, and you already seen these operations in the previous slides. And this is pretty much string concatenation, and what this will do, it will show you hello and whatever name you send to this function. So then further inside the code, you can use that word, the name of that function. So we called it say hello, and inside it you put that argument. So in this case, it can be a string, yuan. You can also define a variable which equals yuan, and then pass just that variable by its name in here. Both things are fine. Yeah, and the idea is that you write this once in your code, and then you can call it as many times as you want. So normally functions are, they're a bit more than just this. This is just a proof of concept to show you how it runs. A more modern way of declaring. Okay, can you please say again the role of $? Oh, nice. You're helping each other. That's nice. Cool. Yeah. So again, the $sign is so whatever goes next to this $sign and the curly brackets, as you can see, they are of a different color. What goes inside them, it's an actual variable, and this variable, it's the same as it's the argument that comes from here. And this operand, what it does, it simply sticks strings together, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. So these are simple functions. A more modern way of declaring a function is this one. So this is absolutely the same thing. And if you remember, I explained how to declare constant variables. I think I didn't explain enough about those. A constant variable, it's a variable to which you cannot perform, or which you cannot perform operations on. And actually, it would be nice that I show you what happens with this constants. Let's say I make a variable, I call it x, make it equal 5. Then I do x equals x plus 5. Also, if for some of you this construction is a bit strange, maybe for those who only did mathematics and not much programming, in programming, you can actually when you do this kind of construction, this is the value of x before the operation, and then this is assigned to x. Basically, what you're doing, you're referring its own value, its own previous value. So what you do here, you just add 5 to that variable. You can also do x equals x minus 5, minus 3, whatever. This can be a multiplication. So that's how you can, increment a variable. You could do an operation on it. And then we want to print x. I'm going to save this. And if I open the browser, refresh, I see 10. So, well, this is a simple addition operation. And now let's see what happens if we don't make this a normal variable, but we make it a constant. I'm going to save it, and what is going to happen now is that when I refresh, I see an error. So this is how how errors are shown in your console. Yeah, I'm about to show you a better way. The question of opposed to Daniel. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. So this is how you see errors in JavaScript, and yeah, Google Chrome has a pretty good way of debugging your code, showing where you have a mistake or so, and what. A very typical mistake, it shows assignment to constant variable. So what you tried to do here, you said that x, it's a constant variable, and what you're doing here, all of a sudden, you're trying to reassign a different value to it. And it shows you that at line 6, inside your index.html file, you're trying to do something which is illegal. Yeah, so now you've seen how an error looks like. You're going to see a lot of this in your life. Yeah. You'll have to deal with them as a developer. So this is about constants. Going back to functions. So what you can, again, what I mentioned, you can declare a function in this way, but also you can create a variable with a custom name that you come up with. And this is pretty much the syntax. This is something that, well, I guess you have to learn by heart. Well, this is the syntax in JavaScript. The arguments, they still go in this round brackets. You can have multiple of them. I'm about to get there. And instead of the word function, you just have this, they call it a thick arrow, I guess. Yeah, so this is a more modern way. And this will do absolutely the same thing. Let me look a bit through the chat. Primitive types, but not for non-primitive types. Push, can you write? Yeah. Yeah, and there was another question about if you can make this operation easier. You can, instead of redeclaring x, instead of writing x again here, this is also a valid construction. Plus equal. You can do also times equal, division equal, a lot of these operands. The only purpose of this operand is that it kind of simplifies your life by having to write one character less, so to say. So this is usually what developers would use. I forgot the actual name for them, but this is just, like shortcuts, so to say. And yeah, just to prove you, if I restart, I see that I still have that same value of 10. There's also some other thing, like if you do x++, for example, this would add 1 to your number, so it would increment it by 1. So you should see 6 here. Minus, it's also an option. This will subtract 1. So this is just some things to make things faster for you. Now, back to the question. In JavaScript, you don't work with classes, right? You can. That was a good answer from Alexandru Guja. Yes. So there are classes in JavaScript. This is something we're going to go through later. It's, yeah, so in the modern JavaScript, you can do that. Back to this. You can after to that. Yeah, that's right. Good at Googling. Now, a lot of times you need your function to actually return something. You know, when your function is pretty much like a kind of an operation. So a very simple one is, let's say you make a function which you wanted to return the biggest number out of 2. You know, might be an actual use case somewhere in a program somewhere. So I declared here a function. I gave it a name. I gave it a name called getBiggestNumber. I say that it has 2 inputs. Okay, now all the inputs, they need a separate name. So adding multiple arguments, you do that. You separate them by using the comma, I think. Yeah, using a comma. And again, the code is delimited by these 2 brackets. So always make sure you open one, you close one. IDEs nowadays, they make your life easier. That they, well, in Visual Studio Code, for example, you would see very nicely if you forgot to close a bracket or open it. So what you have inside here, we have a if statement. You're already familiar with it. You've seen it, how it works. And what we're checking, if x is bigger than y, we will return the value of x. And if that's not the case, it will return the value of y. So if I want to see the output of this function, and I use, like, as arguments, I use these 2 numbers, right, like 7 and 12. You would expect, I guess, that this function would return you the number 12. That's pretty much it. You have also the snippets, these code snippets. You have them in that link on GitHub that I sent you. Any benefits? The modern way of declaring a function. So yeah, I can go a long way in explaining why the modern way is better or not. We can have a very nerdy discussion about it. In simple ways, what can I say? It doesn't really matter. Later, there will be something called anonymous functions, where this construction is very useful because it's, let's say, more memory efficient and allows you to write like very nice dynamic programs. But in simple programs, as we're going to work on now, really both of them are fine. Maybe for beginners, it's even better that you write the word function, that you kind of know what's happening there. I think most of the people who never did programming, when they see like an equal, the stick arrow and so on, like it might not really be clear what the hell is happening. Yeah, if you already have a bit of programming experience and you feel like this looks nice, I would suggest you use this kind of construction, because also, like, later, if you when you get a job in in JavaScript as a JavaScript developer, most likely most of the companies will prefer that you use the latest standards. So going through this, a function can have either 0 or multiple parameters, so you can basically have nothing inside here. A function can return a value. You've seen how that happens. And now a very important one, if inside, actually I have that in the next slide, but the idea is that anything that you declare inside these brackets is not accessible outside of it. And you're about to understand that with the code example. But apart from that, is this slide quite clear? You have any questions now? What about setters? Yes, Julian, there are getters and setters in JavaScript. That is possible just with classes in the latest standard. But specifically about functions, we have any questions? Anything? No. Okay. All right. So going back to this point here about we're now going to learn about the scope. So what does scope mean in JavaScript, and pretty much I think in any other programming language? The scope, it's a specific area of your program where variables and whatever you do, it's only accessible within that area, so to say. So in an example of a function, let's say we have a function, it has this name, it has 2 input variables, And then, this is just an example, but let's say you have some operations happening here between these two brackets, and for some reason you also need to create a variable inside these brackets, right? So we call it some local variable, and we make it equal to 10. And just like in all the examples so far, Java guy, yeah, and then you print it, and this will print 10. Nothing surprising. You've seen this already a lot of times. And again, when you declare a function, the code does not run. For that piece of code to actually run, you have to write the name of that function, with the brackets. Inside it, you have to put some arguments or not. Also, something important to note for those who already did some programming in other more serious languages, so to say. In C++, for example, this would throw you an error because you didn't add arguments. So JavaScript allows you to either add those or not add them, which is both great and bad. So any kind of arguments are optional. But we'll get some of this a bit later when you'll actually write your own functions. Well, that's just something to know. But now, let's say outside of this function, I tried to print out the value of that variable, and this will throw an error. And this is where, we're going to learn about the JavaScript scope. Now, as an example, I'm going to declare a function. I'll call it do something. Yeah, we declared a variable. And let's say this will be a function which adds 5 to anything. Let's call it add 5. And it reads, and it has an input parameter called y. And what this will do, it will return x plus y. So it will return this. So if I just save this, nothing will happen in the browser. Let's say even do a console log here. Let's say I just want to see the value of x just for no reason. You see, nothing runs here. Nothing really happens because a function here, we only declared a function. We just told our program that this will be a piece of code that will run, that we'll use later somewhere in our program. So we'll do add 5. And what we'll do here, we'll add 5 to 10. And we want to print that out to the console because we have to know what's happening. So now I'm going to refresh. So what happened here? This text came here from within the function. Then this function returned x plus y, where y is the number 10, which was sent as a reference here. And then x, it's a local variable here inside the function. They were added together. The result was 15. And that result was then sent to the console to be printed out so you can see it. So this is about functions, but now about the scope. So this is a local variable, which means that if somewhere here I will want to print the value of x, maybe some of you already guessed, we get an error. So again, this beautiful piece of red text, x is not defined. So yeah, it's confusing because you see x is defined here, but it's defined within the scope of this function, nowhere else. So it can only be accessible, manipulated, and done whatever you want with it, only within these two brackets. Outside of it, that one does not exist. Sorry. Yep. Okay. So this is about the scope. So this is relevant for functions, but not only, it's pretty much relevant for every place where you have closed and open brackets. So where you've seen that already, you've seen that in if statements. So if statements, they also have the same construction. And here we also have a local variable that we declared, and we print it here, everything is going to be fine. You try to print it outside of it, your compiler has no idea where that variable came from. Later when you debug your code and you have an issue, always make sure you know where your variables are declared, outside, inside the if statements, inside, outside functions. But with a bit of practice, you'll kind of understand what's happening. You'll probably rewind through this video and it will make sense a bit later. So now all the JavaScript that we did so far, it's quite interesting, but it seems to be kind of like the same thing that maybe some of you learned in school in Turbo Pascal or whatever. Oh, sorry, I did not ask if you have any questions. Yes, Luke, can you do add 5 in the modern way as well, just to be sure what changes? Cool. Good point. Let's go back to the code. Control Z, Control Z, yes. Okay. So this is how we declare the function here. And also something quite important that I probably didn't tell you, any programming language has a way to comment things out. So in JavaScript, you do this the same way you do in C++ by using this sign, the double, whatever you call those lines. So if you need to comment one line, you do it this way, which means that your program will simply ignore this piece of text. // correct. So yeah, so this will pretty much not happen. And yeah, comments are usually used to, maybe you need to temporarily disable a piece of your code, but most of the times code is used for pretty much just explaining what you're doing. So saying stuff like, this is a function that adds 5 to a number. And your compiler does not care about this, but who really cares about this, it's you in the future when you look at your code the second time. So if you write comments for yourself, you'll know exactly where to come back to. Also, comments. Okay, so also, yeah, comments are pretty much just for explaining, what a certain piece of code does, to have certain pointers. A lot of times you'll work with other team members on code, and it's important that you write those. Also, you'll probably notice in the code that I sent you, in a lot of places you'll see these comments. They have absolutely no, they absolutely don't do anything to your code. They're just here to explaining what it happens. Yep, back to this. Yeah, so the modern way of writing the function, coming back to this, I'm going to comment out this whole function. So if you want to do that, you use a slash and a star sign, and then you have to go to where you want the comment to stop, and you write star and slash again. Also, very important, you've probably seen that a lot of times I click something and the code arranges like nicely again. For that, you use Alt-Shift-F. So Alt-Shift-F. So so this will, when you use this in Visual Studio Code, it rearranges your code in a nice way. It's also possible that if this is the first time you install Visual Studio Code, that when you click this, something here in the bottom right will show you that it will ask you if you want to install a formatter for HTML. So just click yes, and yeah, things will run. Now, coming back to this. So yeah, so I comment out the function. There you go. And now I'm going to recreate the same function again. So I'll make a constant equals add 5. Pretty much do the same thing as here. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. I put this in the wrong place. Yeah, okay, so this is how you declare an empty function, and then we're just going to pretty much copy the same code here. And this is the input variable y, and well, as it was expected, if I'm going to refresh this page, I see the same 15. So yeah, so both ways are valid. Again, later you'll see where this is, where this is important. Yeah, I guess we'll get to that at a later stage. So back to the presentation. Guja, the old way called declaring a function will do something called hoisting, which we have some JavaScript professionals here. Thanks for answering the questions. Yeah, so the local and global scope, I explained that. Now, before moving into HTML again, do you have any questions about functions, about scope, about Boolean operations, anything about JavaScript basics so far? If no, I'll move on. Okay. All right. So yeah, eventually everything you would code in JavaScript has to end up somewhere, right? So it has to somehow eventually be rendered on your screen. So you do all these operations because you want certain things to be shown in a certain way to you. So what we're going to do here, where I'm going to show you how JavaScript can interact with your HTML code. So HTML, as I mentioned, it's a markdown language. It's something in which you just very simply statically declare, visual elements, and then they appear in a certain way. Okay, so you can copy paste this code from that GitHub link that I sent you. It's, I think, somewhere in the end. It would be nice if you just copy paste this side and not with everything else. You can experiment later. It's important that you understand what happens here. So yeah, I'll show you incrementally how we're going to get to this example. But what this example does, it's a very simple program which will show you how many times you click the button. Maybe it's useful for someone. So going away from the JavaScript, we're going to have an empty script here. Moving back to the HTML. So HTML, as I mentioned, you just declare static things. They don't have any logic. They don't do any things. Let's open the browser here on the side. So here we just have a piece of, like a large piece of text. So one of the most used tags in HTML is like H1 or P. So H1 means a heading. So if I put 2 to it, it becomes smaller. Don't ask me why a bigger number means a smaller text. I think it also has something to do with Microsoft Word, or I don't know, with programmers, I guess. If you want just a simple piece of text, you can use the tag called P, which I think means paragraph. This is a paragraph. And if you refresh, we see this as a paragraph. So now we're just going to focus on this kind of text, nothing really complicated. And then later you're also going to learn how to do a bit of styling, how to put different colors to it and so on. But I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's quite basic. And you can learn it from W3 schools, and I'll send you all the relevant links. But now what we're going to do, we need to declare a button. We have to show that button somewhere on the screen. And yeah, HTML is meant to render things. So a very simple HTML element is button. Yeah, and the button needs some sort of name. We're going to say click me. There should be some text inside that button. So in fact, any button in any kind of page, wherever you're going, Facebook or whatever, each of them are eventually like an HTML button with a lot of extra styling, some designer stuff. But again, we'll learn how to add those things later. Google Chrome, when it sees a tag of type button, it will render the most simple looking one, a very default one. Later, you'll see how you can add colors to it and make nice margins or whatever. So this button, yeah, it seems to be clickable, but it really doesn't do anything. And now we're going to build up, basically to what we have here in the slide. The second thing that we need a small paragraph which says how many times have you clicked the button, right? So we're going to write, you have clicked the button, and let's put it in a new line. 0 times. Yeah, we save it. There we go. That's how it looks like. And yeah, when I click it, nothing happens because HTML, it's a boring language. It's just, you just declare things and they are displayed on your screen. And, the internet, the World Wide Web at the beginning was pretty much pages only with this. And the only interaction you would have was the fact that you can click on a button and you refer like a URL to it, and that would send you to a different page. But that's all, let's say, the dynamic stuff you get in HTML. So that's why we need now JavaScript. We need to program that piece of logic that will say that when I click the button, something should happen, and then a certain piece of text somewhere has to be altered in a specific way and displayed to the end user. So nowadays there's a lot of frameworks. Maybe you heard like React, Angular, Vue, a lot of hype words and so on. So there's a lot of frameworks which do this in a lot of different ways. But the basic is like what happens in your browser. The most basic way to connect HTML with JavaScript is through unique identifiers, through IDs. So an HTML tag, as you have seen it so far, is pretty much a word delimited by this kind of brackets, I guess. And this means that you close that one. But the first tag can actually get some parameters. So a very simple parameter to an HTML tag, it's ID. So when you declare an ID, this is the way to do it. You write ID equals, and inside this, inside these delimiters, you can write whatever name you want. So I'm going to call it my button. So I can have a lot of other buttons inside my, and you'll see why these identifiers are necessary. I can have a lot of other buttons inside my script, but none of them can have the same ID. That's very important. Like your browser might allow it, but like it's not going to work properly. So for example, if I add another button, I refresh, I see another one, but it's only this one that has that specific ID. Not very useful for now. This identifier doesn't do much. What we're going to look at now is how do I actually make something happen when I click that button. So the way this happens, we'll first declare a function. And we'll call that function, run on click or whatever. You call it whatever you want. And only thing that this function will do, it will print to the console. It will say clicked much. Yep. And then this is the part where you now are about to connect with the HTML. This is the construction document.get element by ID. I will send you some links to the components to have this automatic update, as you can see here in my IDE. But a lot of times you get a suggestion, you click it, and this is a function in JavaScript that allows you to refer to an HTML element inside your page. So what I have to do now, I will use the same ID, and like now in JavaScript, all this code means that I'm referring to this button. Okay. Now, what do I want to do as a reference? A very typical thing that you do in JavaScript is you add event listeners. So when you open a page, there's a lot of events that happen in the page. The most simple event is that you just loaded a page. Another event could be that you clicked something, that you dragged something, that you zoomed in. So there's a lot of actions that happen. For now, we're just going to focus on the click action. So the way to attach a function to that clicking is pretty much this construction. It is something that you'll have to learn. So it's add event listener. So I already have the auto completion, and you'll also have it. And what you do with this event listener, you say click. So this is something that comes from JavaScript itself. So if you want specifically, so instead of this, you can have either click or drag, or different elements have different kind of events. You will learn for those. The document scans the whole index in this case to search for that ID. Yes, that is true. So what happens in this case is this JavaScript runs in the beginning. He searches through all these tags. He finds the one with the right ID. And then he knows, okay, I'm referring to that button. And then what I add to that button, I add an event listener. And then I copy the name of the function. Okay, we have 15 more minutes. I'll try to round off. So what this piece of code does is declares a function which prints out this word. And then this one searches for that button with that ID and assigns this function to run when that button is clicked. So you'll get more familiar with these things as time goes, but this is pretty much, the JavaScript syntax. Now I'm going to refresh. I have only one button with that ID. I'm going to click this button and it shows me clicked. So also this console, it's a bit smart. Usually if you have a lot of texts which are in the same way, the same, like they have it's the same text being printed out, it will just increment a number here. This is just, for the developer to not have a lot of text cluttered together. So this is how you add the event to it. So what's left now, we want this piece of text to show us how many times we click that button. So before we even refer to this paragraph, we need, well, a variable. We need some place to store the number of times that you clicked that thing. So what we're going to do here, we're going to declare a variable times clicked. It's a number, it's equal to 0. And what we're going to do here, we are going to write times clicked equals times clicked plus 1. Or as you already know it, it can be plus equal 1, right? And what we're going to do here, now we're going to write, I'm going to make it simple with the plus sign. I'm going to write how many times I clicked the button. So I'm going to print out that number together with this piece of text. Now I'm going to refresh the page. And when I click it, here in the console, I see, well, pretty much how many times I clicked that button. And this number is stored in this variable, and it's incremented by 1 every time I click the button. Okay, so now the last step into this is to print. So this is not something that your user sees. You only see it as a developer, right? So this is what your user sees, just this. So you want to print that somewhere in your in your web page. So here we have a paragraph, and well, as you guessed, probably like in the previous case, this one also needs an ID, and we're going to give it a name. Counter text. So it's exactly like in that example. And then I want to refer to this ID somewhere in my code. So I only alter the value of this only when the button is clicked. So it makes sense that I do everything in this function. And what I'm going to do here, again, document.get element by, now we need the new ID. So this would be counter text. And what we want to do, we want to change what's inside the two tags. We want to change this piece of text. And how we do that, it's a new construction that you have to learn, .inner HTML. Okay, so give me a second. Yeah, so .inner HTML. And inner HTML refers to any kind of text that is inside between those two tags. So I'm going to make this inner HTML equal, what was it? Clicked, no, I first want a number, I'm sorry. So times clicked plus, actually, let's make it the modern way. So the $, you remember. Let's take this a bit to the right. And then we also want the word times, so it looks user-friendly. So what this line of code will do, it will search for an element with ID counter text, and then it will go to the inner HTML of it, meaning this piece here. And what it will do, it will assign a different value to it. And what this value is, it's this variable, a number that increments 1 by 1, plus this piece of text. I'm going to save now. I'm going to refresh the page. And as I click, you see that this number changes. So the Google Chrome debugger also allows you to take a look at the HTML elements as they are. So you already recognize this thing here on the right as from the Visual Studio Code. And something interesting that this debugger shows you, every time you update something, it gets highlighted. So as you can see, when I click, I see this thing becoming purple. Yeah, so I know that that element was somehow searched by JavaScript and changed. So this is pretty much the whole reason why JavaScript was created in the very beginning. This is, well, at least I believe one of the best ways to learn JavaScript. It's by, really making small applets, small applications. What is the difference between inner HTML and text content? Good question. So text content refers specifically just to this piece of text. Inner HTML would actually contain anything, any other subcomponent, if that makes sense. So if myself, for no reason, I make another another tag inside it, inner HTML would refer to the whole thing, and text would refer to any text inside it. You'll learn some of the differences later. This was just to show you a bit of the proof of how you can connect your HTML to the JavaScript. We'll get more into details into how exactly. Also, the children of that object, correct? Yeah, they're called children. Yes. So with the script, we can write JavaScript outside of it is HTML. Yes. So later you'll learn how to write JavaScript in different files and import it. Now, for just demonstration's sake, we're putting everything here. So later you'll see constructions like script, and I think you have something like source equal, and then you refer to a file or to a link online. We'll learn those later. What I suggest, because we only have 10 minutes left, I suggest that we kind of round off, and then later I can still stay for as much time as you want for any kind of questions. But what I suggest, is that we move on to the challenge, coding challenge that you would do the next week, and then we go back to the questions if there are any. So the assignment. This is probably something that you already did before in any kind of programming course. This is a very typical challenge. So what you would do, you'll write a program, a function, a JavaScript function, which takes as an input a number. And the number is a sum of money. And then your function will calculate the minimum number of bills to divide that sum of money, if that makes sense. So if, let's say, you have something like 152 and you have this kind of bills, this would be 1 bill of 100, 1 bill of 50, and 2 bills of 1, for example. So the minimum amount of bills. And then you can either print those out just through the console log. You can make the function return those numbers. You can use your imagination any way you want. What's important is that you learn how to, write a JavaScript function, that you use a bit of the mathematical operations. And there's no one single way how to solve this specifically. As I told you, there's a percentage operand, for example. Math.floor might come in handy, but I think through this assignment, you will be challenged to start discovering things or trying to look like all the material from today, like where does it actually come in handy. And as an extra, if you're very familiar with these things already and it's very easy for you, I suggest you can also try as an extra thing to have the input read from in the web page and displayed in the text, just like how I showed in this example. But instead of the button, you will have a button and a text input. So if you want to explore things on your own, this would be a very fun extra to look into. And then you'll actually make a full-on, web application, so to say. Prompt, prompt. It can be a prompt if you want. Yes, it can be a prompt, but if you want it more professional, I suggest you use the input HTML tag, like an actual input on the page. And also, as an exploration assignment for next time, I'll send you the link to go and to look in what kind of HTML tags are there. You've seen text, you've seen buttons, paragraphs, and so on. So get familiar with this. Image, for example, lists. We'll learn about those later as well. Try to look into coloring if you want, into styling. Why not? We'll also go through that later, but it would be useful. Take a look at the math libraries, so what math operations are there. So you will have to use the function, maybe, like math.floor, or you'll see a lot of other operations. You'll see what they do. Google is your friend. Try string operations. Try to put strings together. Try to subtract something from them. the Visual Studio Code that you have now installed on your PC, I suggest you look into how to make it, stylish for you. There's a lot of components. If you go here, so in Visual Studio Code, if you go to this icon here, you see a lot of components. What you can look for example, if you want like a specific theme, you can find a lot of colorful themes or whatever. Like for me personally, I picked this one, but just make it whatever looks nice for you. I mean, this is the kind of screen that you'd be looking into for an extensive amount of time, so might as well make it look nice. And yeah, give as many questions as you want. Even if you feel like you're completely lost, like really give questions, even if they seem like very basic questions. If you're even like lost from the first slide of today, don't feel ashamed. Like now it's the time to get up to speed. Later will be more difficult. So just throw in questions. I'll try to refer you to as many links on Google and so on. So yeah, that would be pretty much it. As usual, you'll get the PDF in the end. This time you'll also get a video of the lecture. Yeah, so this is pretty much it. Now I suggest we move on to questions, and I can stay here, well, I guess as long as it's necessary, but I can stay here for, let's say, another several minutes for any of your questions. But before that, I have a question for you. How difficult was the material for you today? Oh, there's a correct answer. That was not supposed to be here. Yeah, anyways. It was just the right challenge for me. Nice. It was very difficult, but I can handle it. Nice. Already knew most of the stuff. Yeah. Cool. It was very... Okay. Yeah. For me, it was definitely difficult to know how much in depth and in details I have to go into explaining some of the things. Maybe for some of you, when I was talking about variables, this was like, come on, move further. And maybe for some of you were like, variables look strange. In math we learned something different or whatever. But yeah, we'll keep this in account. We'll try to keep the right complexity for everyone. But I really hope that in the next, in this lecture and the next one, we kind of get somewhere to an equal amount of knowledge, so we can keep the same complexity. Yeah, but this is good to know. All right, so thanks for joining this lecture. I hope you liked it. And now, questions. You can also unmute yourself and talk. Do people in Holland like beer? Yes, way more than in Eastern Europe for sure. Yeah, Luke is from Netherlands. We used to study together. Yes. Yeah, a lot of types of beers here. Yeah. Yeah, so if you don't have any questions, feel free to leave or to come back later with a message. Yeah, good evening to you if you want to leave. But also, so for the people who said that it was very difficult, but I will try. Just throw some questions now. Why not? Have a private group chat and Facebook to help each other. So you use the Facebook group, like you can make posts in there, and I think I can just open a chat with everyone from there. Please go through the last slide again. So last slide being this one, Emmanuel. Yes.
No, the one not this one.
This?
No, not this.
This one.
Yeah.
Cool. Any specific thing that you want me to explain, or should I just explain the example really fast? What was not clear?
I got lost from. Just start from the document.
Okay. So here.